Hi there, and welcome to Ian's Engage channel. I'm Ian. In a previous video, I showed that I'd updated the track plan and had purchased enough track to build most of it. In this video, I'm going to share some experiments I performed to determine how I would install point motors on my layout. Because I'm going to lay my track on top of XPS foam, which will be at least 2 inches thick in places, I can't install point motors below the baseboard, as even extended operating pins aren't long enough to reach through the baseboard with the foam on top. So I've decided to go old school and use Pico PL10 point motors that are connected directly to the underside of the point. This would usually require cutting a large hole in the baseboard, but in my case it will obviously involve making the hole in the foam. However, after performing some rudimentary searches on how to achieve this, I couldn't find much information about anyone else doing it, which meant I needed to perform some experiments myself to see if it was possible. With over 40 points on the layout, I also needed to make sure that if it was possible, it was also a fairly simple process to perform. So, first of all, I made a test jig that represented my baseboard, which is what I'm doing here. I'm roughly cutting out a section of plywood and am then attaching a couple of buttons to the bottom of it, just so it lifts it above the work surface, which will allow me to put wires underneath. I'm obviously not taking much care while cutting any of this out, as it's only going to be used for testing, although it does show that I need more practice when using a jigsaw. So now I'm cutting out a couple of pieces of XPS foam that will represent the layers that I'm going to place on top of the baseboard. Each one of these is 60mm thick. I'm also using this exercise as practice for when I need to cut foam for Shelfington. Right, here we are at my work table, and this is the jig you've just seen me build. I used Gorilla wood glue to attach the foam to the plywood and also attach the 2 pieces of foam to each other. So now I had to wait for the glue to cure again. Quick tidy up of the work area here. While I waited for the glue to cure, I decided how I was going to embed the point motors into the foam. Pico recommended cutting a hole that was 40mm by 24mm into the baseboard, so I measured that out onto a piece of card and cut it out with my utility knife. This would now be the template for the hole for the point motor. You can see here that the point motor is a little smaller than the template, so there should be plenty of wiggle room to allow for discrepancies. And by discrepancies, I mean bad workmanship on my behalf. So I was now ready to begin trying to fit a point and point motor into the foam. The first step was to place the point on the foam and secure it with a few pins. I then drew around its outline to mark its position, making sure that I marked the position of the tie bar, drawing a line that extended to the side where I wanted to fit the point motor. I then lifted the point. Off camera, I'd made a new point motor template from 2mm thick grey board that was more robust than the flimsy cardboard I'd used earlier. I took the template and lined it up with the markings I'd made for the tie bar and drew around it to mark the position on the foam. This gave me a pretty good approximation of the position for cutting a hole into the foam. I cut the hole using my utility knife, which was relatively easy and which made a nice square cut along the side walls of the hole. Next, I undertook the most fiddliest of jobs and attached the point motors to the underside of the point using the metal lugs. This 15-second clip is from a struggle that lasted for about 10 minutes, which is ridiculous. When I finally got the motor attached, you can hear the nice positive click that the blades make as they switch from side to side. You can see from the images here how the metal lugs keep the motor firmly attached to the underside of the point and how the rod extends through the hole in the tie bar. The next step was to drill a hole into the foam and through the baseboard to accommodate the wires. I drilled a 5mm hole, but this could have been much smaller as there were only 4 small wires required for powering the point motor. I then wired up the point motor to a momentary contact switch which I'd fitted into the plywood base. Power was supplied using a Gauge Master 16V AC power supply. Next, I refitted the point and motor to the foam and pinned it again to secure it for testing. When I did this for real, I'd be using copy decks to secure my track. Turning on the power supply, I held my breath and operated the switch. I was over the moon to once again hear the very satisfying clicking noise, this time as the solenoid motor moved the point blades from side to side. So, this proved that the basic premise worked, but there were a couple of issues to resolve before I could install all of my points in this way. While I was very happy that this method of installation would work, I'd like to find a better way of digging out the foam once I'd cut down the side walls. Also, I wasn't yet 100% sure how I'd ballast the points. It was bound to involve painter's tape or plastic card or cardboard to cover the holes somehow, but I wasn't yet sure how I'd achieve this. But that's what these experiments are all about, isn't it? Now, I know some of you will be, but I'm not too bothered about the accessibility of the point motors once they've been fitted, as they are very reliable nowadays, and there's very little that can go wrong with a solenoid other than it can burn out. When I install the point motors for real, they'll be powered from the DCC bus via a DCC Concept solenoid accessory decoder, which uses a CDU to protect the point motors and allows them to be controlled via DCC. This should, in theory, keep them working for decades. All in all, I think this was a very successful experiment and has shown that I needn't worry about motorizing my points. So that's about it for this update. Actually, I'd appreciate any thoughts or ideas you have to help me improve the process of fitting the point motors, especially about excavating the foam once I've cut down the sides of the template. Alternatively, if you've got any hints, tips, useful tools or techniques to pass on to a beginner in N-gauge modelling, or if you simply want to say hello, then please do so in the comment section. Anything and everything you've got to say will be greatly appreciated. In the meantime, thanks ever so much for watching. Hopefully I'll have another update very soon. Bye.